Hey, 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 welcome to Self Care Saturday. We don't own the rights to this music. You already know what to do. Like, tag, share this video. Glory to God. Let me state for the record, God is a healer. My background music is talking about taking those shackles off your feet so you can dance on today. Hallelujah to God. Old school song by Mary Mary. Again, we don't own the rights to this music. You know what you need to do. Like, tag, share this video. Let somebody know that we're on. It is time for Self-Care Saturday. Remember, we have moved things to first Saturday of every month. And therefore, you need to set your calendars. You need to mark this on in your notes, your files. And be reminded that every first Saturday of the month, we will be celebrating Self-Care Saturday. I'm on set today by myself. So again, we thank God for Lady Carla. And we do miss her presence today. So she'll be back with us. This is another opportunity to celebrate. It is already the month of March. I want to give a special shout out to our Bishop, Eric L. Ellis, and also Lady Beverly Ellis. As you all know, we will be celebrating with them the month of May for his 23rd pastoral anniversary. And we are excited about going down and celebrating with the Raleigh family, the mother church of New Restoration. So get your tickets, spread the word. You've been seeing the Facebook flyer going out. And we are also celebrating the 23rd anniversary with a follow-up banquet on that Saturday. That is May the 22nd. So again, those tickets are $65. The information is on the website on his page as Bishop Eric Ellis, but also you can find it on my page as a share, Kendrick Durant. You can find it on Pastor Earl Richardson page. You don't want to miss the event. We're going to have a marvelous time. He has guest speakers that are already lined up. And so again, we're encouraging your hearts. Get prepared because May is coming and we are still flowing in the year of restoration. I don't know about you, but you realize I'm excited to be alive on today. And we're just so grateful for all the mighty things that God has been doing. And so we're encouraged. You're on with us. It is already 6 o'clock. And guess what? I am on time today. So which means that you now have the opportunity to either come in, tag, or share the information to let somebody know it's time. We're going to be covering a subject today. I really think that's going to bless your heart and your spirit. And that is dealing with boundaries. Yes, dealing with boundaries. And so welcome again, Minister Andrea. We're talking about boundaries today. And there's a lot to share on that subject matter. And I won't be before you long today, but I just want to share what has been on my heart. And what I found three basic definitions for the word boundaries. And, you know, all of us need boundaries at some point. Sometimes we need them up close. Sometimes we need them in the distance. Sometimes we need boundaries dealing with ourselves. And I want to talk about all of those areas, if time allows, and where we possibly need to set those boundaries, where we need to put them. And also, we need to really look at putting boundaries in perspectives. And so we're coming into the almost the middle of March. If I'm not mistaken, I think time goes up either tonight or, tonight. I think time goes up, or either next week, one of them. But in either case, don't miss your clock. Set your clocks up and get prepared because 2022, as you see, is really moving very swiftly. Again, I continue to pray for those who are suffering from COVID or any type of sicknesses or diseases. As you all know, God is a healer. And so boundaries, when you hear the word boundaries, what is the first image that comes to your mind? I know for myself, when I think about a boundary or a boundary line, so to speak, I think about roping something out off or making sure that it has a perimeter basis where I can either flow within that perimeter and make sure I don't go outside that perimeter. So there are three definitions that I found. Here's the first one that I found for the word boundary. It says a boundary is a limit or space between you and the other person. And that is understanding the distance that we have between each other. It said it's a clear place where you begin and the other person ends. You need to hear that. It is a clear space where you begin and the other person ends. The second aspect of this definition deals with, it says boundaries can be defined as the limits we set with other people. That is, which indicate what we find acceptable or unacceptable. in their behavior toward us. And that is probably where I'm going to be parking the gear today. Boundaries can be defined as the limits we set with other people, which indicate what we find acceptable or unacceptable. And I need for you to know that everyone, welcome Sheldon, everyone has boundaries that are acceptable to them and boundaries that are unacceptable. What happens when we cross those lines? What does it look like when we allow others to cross those lines with us as well? And the third definition is that a boundary means a line that marks the limits of an area or a dividing factor of what we call. Now, I found there were 4, 5, and then 6, and even in some cases, 7 types of boundaries that human beings deal with. You can look these up right online, and so this is where I drew some of my information from. And so number one, the first area, hi Aunt Emma, the first area of a boundary line deals with our emotions. And that is, we must govern and have emotional boundary lines in everything that we do. Because you do know there are certain things that can trigger emotions and just can really put you in a place where you don't want to be. And sometimes our emotions can go from being angry to sad to happy, joyous on some occasions. But whatever the situation does, however it affects us, we still need boundaries. So emotional boundaries are things that we got to make sure that we help govern to protect ourselves. And so emotional boundaries are related to many of our feelings. And one area that I want to really dig into is when you are facing some form of embarrassment. How do you put your boundary lines upon being embarrassed? And how far do you let yourself go out when you face a situation, or perhaps you find yourself being thrown into being embarrassed by somebody? When you know, or when you have information that there are individuals that's trying to bring you into that space of embarrassment, you need to make sure you know how to govern yourself. You don't have to put yourself in harm's way to be embarrassed by anyone. As I was praying and thinking about this topic, several different things came to mind. And like I said, but we got to make sure that we are not the enforcer trying to bring embarrassment on others, but then also be sure to mark your boundaries on what you're going to allow to come into you. Because many things can put you in a stage of anger. It can put you in a stage of feeling like you don't need to deal with people. Or in a lot of cases, you might not even want to deal with yourself, because there are some boundary lines that we have to deal with in life. And so the other aspect of a boundary deals with intellectual boundaries. And these are related to our thoughts and our ideas. And that is knowing how far we can go. Now, again, just the word in and of itself had me so excited, because I was thinking about, wow, what are some of my health boundaries? And you do realize this is Self-Care Saturday. And so therefore, there are certain health boundaries that I need to start making sure I stay within the perimeters of. That is, I can't cross certain lines. And one of the things that I personally am dealing with is making sure that I don't walk in a spirit of procrastination, which means some of you, as well as myself, made these New Year's resolutions. And making those resolutions, you talked about what you were going to do. You talked about how you were going to get up and start exercising, how you was going to make certain changes. And in making those changes, where is your evidence of all of what you said in January? And so sometimes you got to put boundaries, believe it or not, on food, on certain things that you eat, because you do know eventually it will affect you. It will affect your health. It will affect your movement. It will even affect sometimes how you think, because we got to make sure that we are governing ourselves with boundaries. If there are no boundaries, you and I are setting ourselves up for failure. Let me just be very clear. If there are no boundaries, you are setting yourself up for failures. And here's the other pitfall of a boundary. When a boundary is not respected, multiple people can be hurt. And this is where I believe sometimes we are very short-sighted, because we feel, look, my life is my thing. It's my course of action. No one's going to be bothered or hurt by what I'm doing. But if you go across certain boundaries, multiple people can be affected by the choices that we make. Another type of boundary deals with material boundaries. And so let me just highlight the last 3 here. It talks about relational boundaries. And boy, do we really need to have a conversation about that, because in some relationships, you got to realize you don't have to take everything that's thrown at you. You got to set a boundary. And sometimes you got to set boundaries with people close, who are dear and near, and people who are far away. Welcome, Sophia. Welcome, Lacey. Glad to have you all on. It's Self-Care Saturday, and we're talking about boundaries. Again, having boundaries. And I'm just highlighting a few things here and dealing with relational boundaries. Boy, we need to make sure there are boundaries in our relationships, but we also need to make sure that we respect others when we deal with them, because other people have boundaries that you do know we can cross at times. And let me put this out there: familiarity gives you no right to cross boundaries, which means you really need to proceed with caution. Oh yes, I need for you to know that familiarity doesn't give you a right to cross boundaries, and sometimes you have to reel people back in to let them know, no, we're not there. No, you can't do that. No, that doesn't make me feel right. Praise the Lord. Welcome, Brother Earl. So dealing with boundaries is something that you really got to put in perspective, because when you remain silent about your boundaries, many times you will be stepped over. Because if people don't understand and know what boundary line you have, or what you have that's governing, whether it be your belief system, the way you operate as a person, what you consider to be good and bad, acceptable or non-acceptable, if people don't understand that reality about you, they will cross that boundary line every time. And there's also physical boundaries. Okay, as I said, dealing with health. But then there are time boundaries. Oh, and I'm guilty in some of these areas with time, but you got to understand, respecting people's time is a gift. It's a gift that they give you time, but it's a gift that you respect their time. And let me share with you, all of us have the same amount of time in the day, so we say, right? But you got to consider, you can't do everything, you can't make everything, and you can't be at the forefront of everything, because your life, your health, your time is just as valuable. So you really need to make sure you market your time in spaces that's going to be the most productive for you. When there is not a place or a people that is providing productivity for you, you don't always have to invest your time there. And so often, do you know what we do? We run to spots and things and people just to show our face and realize it's retracting from our time. That's crossing a boundary line. And so you got to recognize, and Pastor Earl, I'm glad to see you on, because he shared a clip with me and Bishop this past week that was very telling. I mean, disturbing in some sense, but yet informative in another. And so when I was watching the clip, it was about a church and pastoring and dealing with, the different stresses and the pressures of ministry. And, what I saw and what I heard, a lot had to do, in my perspective, it had a lot to do with boundaries. Things that were being overstepped, things that were not being taken into consideration. And so this is what Self-Care Saturday this month is about, is making sure you set some boundaries. And how beautiful that God will continue to send us messages about self-care, self-awareness, self-help, making sure you put things in order. That is so important when you consider a boundary or a boundary line. And so let me just move along here. So boundaries must be created in order to do at least 4 things. Number 1, boundaries must be created to promote and live in your self-care. We've been doing self-care for well over a year now. And even while we're on this aspect of self-care, many of us may be falling back into the same old habits, same old patterns, same old things. And I can almost tell you what the issue is. There has not been a set boundary line on what you're going to permit or not permit. Even in the Bible, Jesus told the disciples, look, I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom of God. And this is what he said out of Matthew. He says, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. And when you look at that term really in the Greek, it really talks about what you're going to permit. So in other words, that's a form of a boundary line. There are certain things you don't have to permit. You don't have to permit people to infringe on your time. to infringe on your personal self-care, to make you feel bad about doing better for yourself or taking care of yourself. When we were studying self-care last year, I saw many different takes of what people thought about the term self-care. And just doing some basic research, I understood that some people believe that self-care is actually a form of pride. Pride in the sense of, in a bad way, meaning that it's self-promoting. And that is some people's take. They don't look at self-care as trying to better yourself or in a godly perspective. But that is not what we're promoting. We're not promoting a spirit of pride. We're promoting a spirit of taking better care of the temple that God gave you. That is exactly the aim when we consider self-care, but also when we're talking about boundaries. You have one life to live. And watch this. With that one life, you don't allow people to try to define how you live in the body God gave you. He gave you the body. He gave you those eyes, those ears, that nose and mouth. So that means you put it to the best workings of what's going to benefit God in your life, which means even with having God, there are boundary lines. That is, morally, there are some things that you have to set boundaries on. That is, spiritually, you understand you got to set some spiritual boundaries. And God knows we understand we got to set some boundaries in terms of dealing with truth and falsehood. That is a relevant subject matter that you and I must consider when we think about self-care. So boundaries must be created in order to promote and live in self-care. Secondly, boundaries also means that you and I are going to maintain a level of respect. And so whenever you are putting boundaries in place, realize and make sure others around you recognize that these boundary lines that I have, or whatever my motto is regarding my boundaries, that they're there to promote respect. They're there to encourage respect. Now, there's so many sayings about respect as well. In order to get respect, you got to give respect. You know, some have the mindset that if a person is older, they automatically get respect. Some people believe that based upon your profession or the title that you could hold, that you are deemed respect because of your personal standing, whether it be in community, whether it be in church life, whether it be at home, you know, as a parent, grandparent, sibling, depending on your level of where you stand in that title or role. Some people just automatically believe that a level of respect is due to anyone. My late grandmother used to say, the late Miss Anna Mae Wright Hudson, she used to say, even a dog on the yard deserves respect. Now, that expression is not necessarily referencing us as a dog, but it just goes to show sometimes or some things we may consider the lower state of beings or creation is that they deserve respect. And so maintaining your boundary lines is going to keep your respect in its right perspective. Do you hear me on this evening? And that is good news because that boundary line is going to make sure people know how to deal with you, that they know how to talk to you. And we got to consider when we communicate with each other, how you talk to a person is also a privilege because they don't have to allow you that space of engagement. So never take for granted that just because you have access, that you are automatically due that space to engage with an individual. No, that's still a line of respect. I allow you that space, that inner connection to be up close and personal. But if I don't allow it to you, it also doesn't mean that I have a problem with you. And so we want to keep that in mind. And so a third thing, when you talk about boundaries and what it can do for you and I, boundary lines can also guard your personal space. Do you realize that when the seasons change, winter, spring, summer, and fall, what do we generally do? We change clothes. We clean our closets. We make provisions for new, and sometimes we get rid of the old. We give away sometimes. And so we throw out. And so in this case, you don't necessarily have to throw away, but sometimes you may have to remove certain people that are up close and realize what their value is. Because sometimes their value or their purpose, what they have come to do in your life, maybe that time frame has shifted. It doesn't mean you throw away the person, because you know the old saying, be careful of the bridge you burn, because you may have to recross it. And so as we consider going over bridges, you don't burn them. You just realize I got to go over it and get to the next destination. But God knows, be careful how you burn them, because that's a boundary line. And if you burn every bridge that has helped you to get over, you do realize sometimes the way life will blow, the circumstances to you and I, you got to go back and you realize you've burned a bridge and now you can't get the proper help that you once needed, or you can't get that advice you might want or desire. And I'm talking about this on a dual perspective, which means I'm talking about us, but I'm also talking about things outside of us, meaning dealing with other outside people. That is dealing with boundary lines. Boundary lines is there to promote self-care. That's one. Boundary lines is there to maintain respect. That's the second thing. Third thing, boundary lines is there to guard your personal space. And as I mentioned, guarding your space is not an ungodly act. Guarding your space actually means that you're using wisdom now. So when you pray to guard your space, ask God for wisdom. Because sometimes many of the people that we have sometimes up close that we deem so important and so needed in our lives, beloved, I can almost share with you, for the most part, when you really look at what they bring or what they take, if you find that they are doing more drawing rather than giving, then sometimes you gotta make some boundary lines. Oh well, I can't go over that today because I realize this space and this person, and it's not always a bad thing. It just means I know that they pull much time out of me, which means I neglect some things I really need to get done because I'm so busy allowing my personal space to be occupied by people, sometimes by certain things, and we got to make sure we govern that. So govern that space, guard that space, but as I said, guard it with wisdom. The fourth thing, when you're talking about boundaries lines, is that it keeps your peace in perspective. And don't we all need a good space or degree of peace? Which means aggravation, you got to put boundary lines to make sure you're not aggravated. And make sure that you are not the one creating the aggravation, because in several cases, we sometimes point at what we are. Do you hear me? We point at and criticize what we are or what we could be doing. So you just want to make sure that when you are guarding your peace or keeping your peace in the right perspective, just because a situation looks like it's blown out of proportion, you don't have to walk into it. You and I do not have to succumb to that. Set your boundary line. You do realize you don't even have to go towards the conversation. You can go a different route, you know? And so if we talk about confusion, if we talk about being in a dilemma, if we talk about anything that's going to try to take away from that peace that you have, if you have a place of peace and you have that space where you consider sacred time, where you consider it a sacred model for you, that you operate in functioning relationships, functioning conversations that's going to bring about wholesomeness, that's going to bring about togetherness. I mean, all of these things are beneficial for you and I, right? Well, let me show you something. Whatever brings frowns, now I'm not saying that you can remove yourself from the earth from it, but what you can do is you can keep your peace even though the world might be falling around you. And so whatever doesn't bring peace or promote that peace regarding your self-care, you need to make sure you put a boundary line on it. And also recognize it when it is affecting your peace. Because don't walk away saying, it don't bother me. No. I've learned to say that I don't like the way I feel. That aggravates me. That makes me feel that way. That makes me feel like my peace is being disturbed. And you need to be able to share that with individuals, and whether they be close or far from you. So being able to share with them, I'm trying to do all I can to guard my peace. But then here's the other beautiful thing. Help others. Sometimes you got to help others guard their peace, because I get many people that share different things based upon what they're dealing with and doing. And I realize a lot of times things that I hear, I just simply want to say, you're letting them affect your peace. You're at peace with where you are, but now you're going to take on. Why take on the stresses of somebody else? You see, I'm laughing, right? Because we do this, and boy, we can get so aggravated taking on the stresses of somebody else. And so I know what can help you remain in your peace. You set a boundary line that, oh, I'm not taking that call today. That's a boundary. Oh, yes, that's a boundary line. You might need to turn your phone off. Sometimes you shouldn't answer the text. Intentionally not look at it, which means leave your phone on the dresser for a while, for a few hours, in some cases for a day. And I've come to discover how bad the phone can be for me at times, because I remember one time I left my phone home. I was on my way, heading out, and man, you should have seen me all up under the seat. I mean, looking in the compartments of the car, trying to find the phone. But watch this. I was so frustrated by wanting to get that phone, thinking I'm missing something. I had no focus on where I was going. And of course, you know, stirring with the cars all over the road. And so I hear some of y'all out there, you shouldn't be trying to mess with that phone and drive anyway. You're absolutely right. And you know why, in many cases, we're like that? Because we don't have boundary lines. And so I'm learning, especially the older we get, you know, a lot of older people, I used to think anyway, more mature or older, however you define yourself, they generally don't let a lot of things aggravate them, because there's a place where you can come to where you realize life happens, things happens, people gonna be people. And let me repeat that again. People are going to be people, Andrea. Which means you and I sometimes look for people to never change up on us, sometimes expect them to. The same way you and I want boundary lines, they have boundary lines too. So what if people around you start, we call it acting funny. No, I don't necessarily look at it that way. Not in all cases. But, you know, some cases they are, but not in every case. In some cases, maybe they are creating boundary lines to have a better self-care or wellness for themselves. The same way you and I want peace, we want to guard ourselves, we want to walk in respect, we want to promote self-care. Others desire the same, even if they're not expressing that. So don't ever be so quick to believe that you are the person who's totally focused on self-care. No, you're not the only one. And so we make that mistake, or we can make that mistake, to believe that I'm that person trying to get things right with me, so the people around me should understand. They won't unless you tell them what your boundary line is. So for the month of March, that's what I'm asking you to do. Make sure you put up creative boundary lines. Boundary lines that's going to promote your self-care. And so here's some things to consider when we think about healthy boundaries. Be open to others, but clear about what you would tolerate. Be open, but clear about what you can and will tolerate. Oftentimes, when people don't know what we are tolerating, or what really moves us, or what our pet peeves are, they don't understand what boundary lines are in place. And so if you're not clear and open, you can miss the opportunity to share with them, because I do believe in every stage of where we're at, especially us as adults, we create the boundary lines, and we can set them to protect, or we can set them to open ourselves up to the various things that we're dealing with. Nothing comes in your life by accident. Nothing slips in your life. Nothing just happens. Oftentimes you see the progression of what's taking place, and then we'll begin to say in ourselves, in our heads and minds, I don't like the way that feels. I don't like the way that person does that. I don't like the way this is going. Now, here's what's interesting. We take on these stresses, but yet we won't tell the person sometimes. You need to communicate to whatever is putting that type of stress on you, and let them humbly know what you will tolerate. You do realize that's why they make no trespassing signs. Put it up sometimes. No trespassing in this area. No loitering in this area. No soliciting in this area. Those, you know what those signs are? They are boundary lines. They're simply teaching you and I, and sometimes we got verbal and nonverbal communication in these things, because even when you're at a stoplight, the colors tells you what you can do. You need to sometimes hold up red. Sometimes you need to understand what the caution light is. The yellow. Now some say yellow, some say gold, but depending on your preference of color. And then the green. Now some might say amber, whatever. But what I'm saying is stop sign gives you and I a way to understand communication. But watch this. It also teaches us the boundary, because if you run that red light and you don't stop at that intersection, what are you waiting on? An accident. So you need to be open. You need to be open, and you need to be able to communicate. Also, healthy boundary lines means you keep your standards in place and you don't ride the slippery slope to appease others. Boy, I can spend some time there. Why ride the slippery slope just to appease others when you realize, I don't like the way that makes me feel? You don't have to do that, And so when your standards are in place, you can make sure that you govern yourself in a way that's going to bring about benefits, healthy benefits of your bound. You do know you can prosper from your boundary lines. You can prosper from them, because what they'll do, they'll keep your standards in place. That means people don't get to walk over what you believe. We're in a world that is very dogmatic, that is very system driven. We're in a world that is built on information. We are in a world that is thriving off of who's right or who's wrong, so to speak. Look, we have these systems in place, and what they do, it's dependent upon what that person believes in. So I'm a person who ascribes to faith in God through the Lord Jesus Christ. You see how detailed that begins to come, rather than just saying I have faith? Because you can have faith, but you got to make sure you identify what your standard is regarding faith. My standard is that I believe in God through Christ. So which means the teachings that come from God through Christ, that's the standard that's going to govern my life. So there is a boundary line on what I believe and what I don't believe. But let me show you how warped and hypocritical the system can be. Because there are various people or groups that have their opinions, their ideas, and their faith or belief in what they believe. And they'll say, respect us. We want these rules, these laws, and these are the boundaries of what you can say, what you can't say. And I'm talking about in every arena. I'm not pinpointing no specific group. But make sure we don't be biased when it comes to you setting up your boundary line, but yet you want to stone others for having boundary lines for their standards. And I'm talking to us personally today. Your self-care must be a quality standard of living for you, which means what happened last year, you don't have to operate in that this year. What you allowed 10 years ago, look, it doesn't matter if you have been allowing people to take advantage of you for the last 30 years. That can change today if you put the right boundary line in front of you. And you don't have to do it to try to mark a point with this crude type of behavior that I'm going to show them this is my boundary line. No, see, for me, I just do it smiling. We're not doing that. See how easy that is? That's easy. That's peaceful. And sometimes just let people know that's not what I believe. And you still smile at them. But see, you want to get all dogmatic. You feel like you need to argue the point. You got to prove your boundary line exists. No. You make sure you understand what exists in your life, what's important. Stand on the principle. Another thing is that when you're dealing with healthy boundary lines, we got to live, and I believe you're going to really this is really going to resonate with you and I. It did for me, so I pray it does for you. We got to live in a code of maturity. Yes. I said a code of maturity, a code of conduct. Sometimes I hear that amongst different employers and things of that nature. So never stoop to the distractions. There's a code of maturity that you and I must live in. And that is know when you are out of bounds on something and take actions to correct it instead of blaming. Whenever I'm out of bounds, no one really has to tell me, you know that, right? Because I have personal convictions. And so, but then even if you don't have personal convictions, you have conscience or tuition or your third eye, whatever you call it. But generally speaking, I do believe for the most part, people innately have something in them, subconsciously, consciously, within them, that I do believe helps them to understand you are over boundary lines here. Now, some people may disagree with me and say, no, some people just don't care. Yeah, that exists too. But then know when you are out of bounds on something and take actions to correct it, which means don't let things linger for another year. Perfect example. We've been talking about health, and dealing with various situations. Self-care actually started because we almost died from COVID. And so a part of the process of self-care was, we got to do better. And our immune system, though it fought against the virus, we also realized the body had endured some stresses. Do you know why? Because it wasn't being kept as properly. There were certain organs that I realized that needed more attention than others. And this is real life stuff, because if you and I still don't believe that COVID is real and is affecting people, don't put boundary lines up for yourself and see, won't you be affected, infected and affected. So another thing is, study your habits and your boundaries and stay in your mirror. Now, I know the expression we often hear is stay in your lane. I don't want to say that. I want to say stay in your mirror. A lot of times when you look in the mirror in the morning, you got the clearest picture of who you are, whether with makeup or without makeup. And sometimes that's what makeup do. It can alter the boundary lines. And so don't put makeup on things that you should be making sure people are able to see. The mirror is a place that's going to give us the full picture of who we are. Now, for some, you can deal with mirror just as a imagery or somewhat a symbol in terms of who we are. But I'm talking literally speaking, symbolism, and in a literal sense, that sometimes we need to just go to the mirror and just look at ourselves. What are you allowing people to do to you? What are you allowing to be done to yourself? Because in many cases, self-sabotage is real. That is, some people don't know how to live in a state of peace, a state of encouragement, a state of happiness, a state of self-care. Some people would rather be around emotional distress, dysfunction, people putting people down, dealing with embarrassing situations, gossiping and talking and running people down from left to right. Look, you got to make it up in your mind, I need to put some boundary lines up. That's not what I want in my day. Because here's the other part of the scenario. When things start coming back at us, guess what we start doing? We start looking as if we don't know why these things are happening. It's the age-old saying, scripturally too, that we reap what we sow. And so we got to study our habits. Study your habits. If you know you have a habit of talking about people, and you do it with certain people, sometimes you got to tell them, look, I can't mess with you today, Sometimes you got to let them know. If certain people pull you into certain habits that's going to make you feel bad, why do you keep going with them? That's common sense, isn't it? And even if you can't understand it as a common sense factor, if you know that something brings you into an uncomfortable state, and you constantly put the boundary lines up, but then you allow the same scenarios to keep dragging you back into the behavior, then who really has the problem? The things around you, or you, the person? I'll let you answer that. Here's another thing. When we're talking about healthy boundary lines, it is keeping dignity as a state or quality of being worthy of honor and respect. I can't stress this enough. Whether you are married, single, separated, divorced, in a relationship, whether you call it complicated, not sure about it, don't know if we're going to make it or exist, if someone is in a state of disrespecting you, you were not created for that. If someone is in a state of putting you down, you were not created for that. If someone is in a state of attacking you verbally and always coming at you, and pointing at you and trying to make you feel insignificant, trying to devalue you and bring you down, you don't have to accept that. There needs to be a boundary line put up, and that is dignity. Understand, God has created us with self-worth and dignity. He's given us intelligence. He's given us value. He's given us worth. We were created in his image. And so that's what you can stand on. Your boundary line is that I'm created in God's image. And I'm never one who's going to consider myself ugly, down, or live in a system of where I'm acting as if my self-esteem needs to be low to make you feel better. Do you know that there are people who does that? They live low so others can feel high. I can't give that away. That's too much power to give anyone, to make someone believe that their existence has so much authority because you now devalue yourself to try to make them feel creatively good. And that is constantly complimenting them, constantly always having to affirm them, constantly having to try to share with them what's good about them. And when they don't give that back, there needs to be some boundary lines set up. Because if someone is constantly taking, you do know, even in the natural sense, eventually we do and can get tired. Brother Sheldon, I hear you. Please say a special prayer. Sister Sylvia Scott and her brother. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. She did reach out to me. So definitely, special shout out to Sylvia and her brother. So we're definitely praying for him. And we pray the Lord continue to heal and to bless in that situation. So keep your dignity intact. And so there are 6 categories as I close here of where you and I will encounter where we should put up boundary lines. Number 1, you need to put up boundary lines at home. I know a lot of times we think we're going to say the enemy. I'll get there. That's probably number 6. Boundary lines need to be put up at home. Did you hear me? There are boundary lines that need to be put up at home. Now, I can't go through all the detail because you know your situation. You know what's working. You know what's not working. But I do know you need a boundary line there. And sometimes that boundary line has to be put up to make sure people understand that this is a year that you're just trying to better yourself. You're trying to work in your self-care. You're trying to work out your own soul salvation, so to speak. You're trying to do what God has called you to do. You're trying to walk in the spirit and the power of manifestation. These are all components of the good that God wants for you and I regarding self-care. The second place where you need to put up boundary lines is at work. You know? And I can spend time in both of these areas, just taking you through the different doorways, whether it be at home. Some people need to put boundary lines up in regards to cooking. You know, you cook, they don't eat. So if you've been doing that for years and years and years, now I'm about to mess somebody's house up here now. Sometimes stop. Now you may say, well, no, I got to do my duty. Okay, but if you feeling so unappreciated, and see, that's the key now. If something really bothers you, why keep doing it when you can make a common expression, hey, we need to talk about this. We need to discuss this. But meanwhile, you slamming pots. You about to break every glass. Oh, God, you about to break every glass in the house because you are mad you don't have a boundary line up, that they got you feeling unappreciated. And this is what we do. We can be so immature in the things that we do and how we express ourselves. I'm included. I'm not talking, at you. I'm talking with you. I'm with you. I'm included. So we got to do better. I'm talking about myself. We have to do better in expressing. This is a boundary line here. Look, if I'm going out to help, to assist, going out of my way, the least you can do is say thank you. But then when individuals begin to put you in the posture to where now you feel, like I said, they don't care, or is it not important to them, you need to put up some boundary lines. And again, now, am I telling you to leave? I'm in no way encouraged, especially a married couple, telling you to leave your marriage. But I am saying, put some boundary lines up. Let me also help you, parents. Put some boundary lines up with your children. If children are not functioning the way you want them to, or respecting you, or honoring you, now, I can't go too far there because parents, look now, a lot of the kids say we provoke them. So you got to be careful. The Bible says don't provoke them to anger. And so, which means try to govern them with your standards, with your boundary lines of the rights and wrongs. And if they follow them, you work with them, encourage them. But you don't got to beat people across the head, because clearly, if you want something to stop, you have the authority to do so. If you want something not to continue, you have the power to discontinue it. If you want something to keep going, you have the power to influence it with the fuel of your mouth by simply saying yes or no. See how calm I'm talking there? Because we get so worked up, and I too, I went through some of those things. Still deal with them at times, but there are boundaries that have to be set. Second thing, at work, set boundaries at work. Boy, years ago, true story, I was working at a job, I think it was a medical building, but nonetheless, the individual came in, and I think it was right before 4 o'clock. He every day, right before 4 o'clock, before this person would leave, they would say, "I hate this job." I had just started working there. Every day he would say that, and I just couldn't understand why he expressed such anger. I didn't know all the detail, but I do know and I'm not exaggerating, every day he said, "I hate this job." So one day came, the gentleman said, "I'll be so glad when I don't have to do this job anymore." Now, what I heard is what I thought he meant. Do you not know that day that he made that announcement, "I'll be glad when I don't have to do this job anymore"? They called him in the office and fired him. And the way he was crying and, "Oh, I can't, what am I going to do with, I got bills." And I'm serious. I was sitting over there going, "But you was just saying this what you wanted." So let's be consistent. Let's be for real about what we say we want. Because anything you claim you want, you best believe you call for it long enough and you will get it. And I mean that in every or any type of situation. You call for it long enough, it might just manifest. It might just happen. And I'm talking about the good. I'm talking about the bad. Because some things we want, you don't need. And some things you think you don't need, that's the very thing that needs to remain. But man, he and I saw how he, left the office distraught. And I was perplexed, because I'm saying, you wanted that. You spoke that into existence. You made sure that was a part of your conversation. That was your mantra coming in and coming out. I don't like this place. I hate this job. But yet, that same job was feeding, was helping to pay bills. It was bringing about sustainability on the person's life. So he lost that job. But boundary lines have to be set at work, because if you don't like a place, look for a new place to work. See, we have that liberty. Now, unless God has told you that's the place to be, I mean, granted, and even in that case, pray and ask the Lord, help me to find something better suited for me, better suited for my skill sets. The one thing that I guess my heart really goes out for people, especially who has put themselves on the path of learning, so to speak. And they have acquired degrees, and they have paid money for college, and they have invested. And I mean, when you put such an investment towards academics in any perspective, you're looking for a return. You're looking for a harvest on that. But my heart really goes out for individuals 4 to 5 to 6 years of college, and they come out and they can't even find a job making $1 or $2 above minimum wage. Now, depending on the state you're in, that wage gap may vary, but my heart goes out to them. And yet, you find individuals who may not have the same type of acumen to where they are working, and it seems like they're on the same level with you, and you have went out of your way to put an investment on education. And so never feel cheated. It's just that you now need to set some boundary lines up. Rather than going to work talking about how bad the job is and how much you hate it, do something different. Begin to venture out to look at something that may match your degree, or something that's going to really put you in a perspective to really help you to provide, or to put you in a passion to where you can really enjoy what you're doing. Or, let me hit it one more time, or start your own business. If you don't like punching the clock for somebody, then you realize you're going to be miserable. In a lot of cases, punching the clock for somebody, because that person is going to govern. They have to follow by rules, and you and I have to govern and walk under those rules. So knowing when to do something different is key when you put those boundary lines in place. Secondly, realize what you do and do not offer, especially to, home, work. Realize what you do and what you don't offer. There are a lot of things that I would like to believe, I'm the greatest person in the world. I would like to believe that. But you do realize, I know that there are some things I'm limited on. I know that there are some things I can't fully do. I know that there are some things where I can't fully rise up to the abilities or the experiences that people want. But guess what? I will not die because I can't reach some of those potentials. But this is my reality. Is as long as there's an opportunity, I can try. It doesn't mean I make my life now miserable. I'm guarding my self-care. And so you can try, but if you realize you don't meet the standard of what people want and what they're desiring, or in some cases what they're demanding, do something different. If you realize that I don't got what they need, look, they going on about this and that, so you got to do something different. Boy, listen to this. And I'm almost an hour in. Got 8 minutes. I have down here autopilot acceptance. Let me say it again. Autopilot acceptance. And what that means is, if you are in a situation and you know you don't like it, stop living on autopilot. That means you just accept it. Well, it is what it is. No, it's not is. No, this can be changed. I don't have to accept that. And too often, that's what we do. Well, that's just how they are. And look, if you are injuring me, I'm not going to sit around and keep saying that's how they are. I'm going to stop you from injuring me. Now, am I telling you to go out there to hurt and harm somebody physically? No, I just said I'm going to stop you from injuring me. Let's be realistic about what we're dealing with here. Because otherwise, what we do? We sit around with all these threats. They make me sick. They make me this. They make me that. Your self-care is being compromised. You need a boundary. Third place you need to put healthy boundaries at is with in-laws and extended relatives. Oh, man. So cultivate conversations of what's important. You can't make every event they want you to make, and they can't make every event you want them to make. And let me say this, and this happens so often in families. If you don't attend your family stuff or your in-law stuff, don't expect them to attend yours. And now your mouth is as long as Texas because they haven't attended your stuff. Well, you didn't attend theirs. And I say, for especially for anyone who have children, your kids got birthdays, graduates, and all these things coming. Don't expect people to bend over backwards when you won't step a foot into other people's celebrations. That's not right. That's not fair to them. And now they feel somewhat bombarded that you got them in this position. And if you don't believe these are real conversations people are having, ask your in-laws. Ask your families. Just really ask, how you feel about such and such? Well, I don't really care about them because they don't attend nothing that we have. Ask them. Oh, this exists. This is real. But instead, we front like we all together. And we know we can't stand each other in some places. But it doesn't have to be that way. Now, I promote self-care. So what I'm saying is that cultivate conversations of what's important. And when you cultivate those conversations, you help people to understand where you stand. And so I would share a situation, but I can't share that one. So anyway, strengthen your surroundings of your idea of personal boundaries, but be clear that others have them and desire that we respect them as well. So let me say it again. Strengthen your surroundings of your idea of your personal boundaries. The way people understand your boundaries is they have to hear from you. So you don't go the month of March going, well, hopefully they'll understand me. They don't understand unless you communicate it. And if they continue to do it after you have communicated, then you have to take things to the next level. So you find a next level of how you're going to deal with that individual or those circumstances. And so biased boundaries will create an undeveloped picture. Did you hear me? Listen to this. a bias boundary, which means I let certain people get away with stuff, and then certain people, oh, no, 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 I'm not going to say nothing to them because that's my friend. Why don't we just be equal across the board? If you can save yourself a lot of heartache. Be equal across the board. And so therefore, if you allow, because sometimes this is what we do. Now, Jesus actually said with some religious leaders, this is what he said that they did. And I think I can summarize this best with this analogy. Jesus said the Pharisees, those were religious people who, said one thing and did another. He said they strain at a gnat, but try to swallow a camel. So in other words, small issues, you ever see people, oh, they bad on small things. They talking loud, they got all this energy, they huffing and small things, but they dare not address a camel type of issue. So in other words, they're scared. You can find out more about that tomorrow on services. Don't be biased in your boundaries. If you set a boundary, make sure it's for everyone. Because when we set biased boundaries, you are going to create an undeveloped picture, which means certain people on the other side looking going, well, why they let this one do that? And yet, if I do the least little thing, it's wrong. No, we can't do that. Last but not least, in my 3 minutes, you got to set boundaries with friends. And here are 4 things you can tell friends. No, I respectfully disagree. I had to learn that language, man. When friends had me, boxed in and I didn't feel comfortable. Back up off me. My thing is, I didn't, at one point, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't know how to tell them because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. But now, if something is rubbing me the wrong way, no, I respectfully disagree. And I've learned how to smile more with it. I realize now I don't have to throw an axe or anything. I respectfully disagree. I don't have to raise my voice. I respectfully disagree. Second thing you can say is, whatever the situation is, yes, I'm okay with that. See, that's not hard to do. That's a boundary line. Yeah, I'm okay with that. If I'm not saying something about it, you best believe I'm allowing you to do it because, I'm okay with that. But if I'm not okay with it, you will hear, no, I'm not okay with that. That doesn't make me feel comfortable. I don't accept that. I don't agree with that, respectfully. And then also you can just tell people that makes me uncomfortable or that makes me comfortable. I'm good with that. No problem. Last but not least, I'm not comfortable or satisfied with the way you are treating me. That's probably the largest boundary line that you can put up regarding an enemy, a friend, a family member, an in-law, at home or at work. You can respectfully let people know that. Philippians 1:6. This is what it declares. I thank you for your time that you've shared with me today in Self-Care Saturday. Again, we'll see you on first Saturday in April. And whereas we're looking forward to a wonderful time, first Saturday in April. So be sure to set your calendars. But Philippians 1:6 declares, he, that is Jesus, this is the Apostle Paul saying this, that began a good work in me. Well, God who began a good work in us. He will perform it. God will perform that work through Jesus Christ to the day that he returned. And so therefore, what God starts in you and I, he will also complete. Don't be discouraged, but please, I've given you an hour worth of conversation to begin to set some boundary lines in your everyday living and also for the month of March. That is our self-care session, and we'll see you on next month. Thank you for joining, and may the Lord richly bless you.